Welcome to the Inspire to Invest podcast, where we're sharing inspiring stories from business owners, entrepreneurs, and real estate investors on the pursuit of wealth and financial freedom. This episode of the Inspire to Invest podcast has been brought to you by Capital Connectors. Hey everybody, welcome to Inspire to Invest. I have Scott Harris with us today from New York City. He is a founder of Magnetic Real Estate, a residential real estate brokerage where he's marketed and sold more than $2 billion of real estate since 2003, and he's also a real estate investor. Scott and his team are dedicated to helping their clients discover that real estate is about so much more than a transaction, and in his upcoming book, The Pursuit of Home, this is dedicated to helping you navigate the emotional world beneath the transaction. So thanks for taking time out of your day to be with us today. How are you?
Hi, Serena. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here.
So you've been in real estate for 22-ish years at this point in time. Maybe you can take us back to the beginning and where real estate came into your life and how you've kind of carved out this space for yourself.
Well, Serena, real estate came into my life very, very early. I was the child of a marketing director at a residential brokerage firm in New Orleans, and my dad owns a commercial warehouse and has been working in real estate as a landlord for my whole life. So we talked about real estate at the kitchen table, and I did absolutely nothing with it otherwise until I was 28 when I moved to New York. And it became evident that I needed to figure out what my next step was.
Yeah.
And my family, my stepmother said, I think you'd be a really good real estate agent. And it turns out that people know you better often than you know yourself. Yeah. And it was right out of the gate, it was clear that this was something that I was really good at. And it's just been obviously lots of bumps in the road along the way, but really a lot of success and a lot of learning, and thankfully a lot of opportunity to help people move forward.
So can you talk a little bit about two things? So in your bio, it mentions how you talk about the emotional side of real estate. And that's actually one thing that I found challenging myself, going from a B2B type business for almost 20 years, shifting into residential real estate. I'm like, people are crazy. Like, sometimes they're just, it's such an emotionally charged situation. Sometimes people can't always dial that back. So maybe you can talk about how you manage that with your clients, just to make sure that you are reaching their objectives and stuff like that. They're not clouding their judgment with, how they're feeling.
Well, what I would say, Serena, is that people meet us when they're at their most stressed. So I think we have to I show up really kind of with a lot of compassion about that. It's been measured year in, year out that it's one of the most stressful things people go through. So we sort of know that going in, and people will go from being super stressed, yelling at us, all of the emotions that surround this big transition in their lives. And then after the transaction, it's all love, and we love you so much. And you did such a great job for us. So clearly it's not about getting people, where we're like trying the emotion not to cloud their decisions, but it's like more about making room for them to go through whatever they need to go through and be patient enough so that we can let them kind of yell and scream and have that kind of tantrum, ideally without letting the transaction die or wither on the vine. But it's a lot about helping people stay out of their own way. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, that's something that, when you have had clients that are, again, upset or they're yelling or whatever it may be, especially when you're dealing with maybe couples going through a divorce or something like that, you just kind of like, just listen. You obviously wear a lot of different hats when you are in this space. Now, when you were starting out, when you were 28, did you initially start working with a team, or how did you kind of create that name for yourself? Because it is such a highly competitive industry, and obviously it has changed as things have evolved with social media and now AI and stuff like that. So maybe you can talk about what you're doing then and now how you're also just trying to stay competitive with all these changing dynamics.
I started, Serena, working at a big box brokerage. So the first step was you can do this in New York. I worked just in rentals.
Yeah.
So they had a great training program. I'd already had a whole background of sales before I started in real estate.
Yeah.
And so what I was doing was transposing all of the things that I learned into real estate. So I went into rentals, and at the time, this was still when Craigslist was a thing.
Yeah.
and actually the classified ads existed.
Yeah.
It was at the very tail end. So I have definitely seen the the gamut. This is before we even had smartphones,
Yeah. Well, it's
right?
probably back when people are like faxing their signatures or going in person.
Totally. You know, a
Yeah.
lot of stuff in person.
Yeah.
And so I got the first 2 years was really working, getting cutting my teeth and building that. Then I moved to a larger company that was formerly owned by Barbara Corcoran. It's called the Corcoran Group here in New York, and that's where I got into sales and really got my built my sales experience. And then 2 years later, I moved to a company that's called Brown Harris Stevens, which has my name in the masthead, but I actually am not one of the partners in that business where I stayed for 18 years. That's where I got the
Could
bulk
have
of.
fooled them though, right?
Exactly. People often asked, and I'm someone who likes to tell it like it is.
Yeah.
And so 18 years of a lot of experience building my business there. And on the heels of that, that was really the foundation for the launch of Magnetic.
Yeah.
And how do we stay relevant? I think over the last few years, really since COVID, we focused on video. I love it's a more fun way of communicating. I also, from a B2B almost standpoint, I've always loved being on LinkedIn, which is a great place for people who are business people and who maybe are a little more data driven. And so
Yeah.
you sort of balance the LinkedIn where I'm writing about deals and information, and also the like you said, the emotional side of real estate. And then I complement that with the work I do on Instagram, which is a little bit more visual,
Yeah.
a little bit more fun, and a little bit
Very
less
cinematic these days,
business.
with the words
Oh yeah.
flashing through the sky and all the 3D animations and stuff like that. So I think it is good just for people, demonstrating their capabilities when they're marketing properties and stuff like that.
Right. And we can pat ourselves on the back and, do a little bit of, self promotion, but ultimately
Yeah.
people really want to get value
Yeah.
from all of those different platforms. And we're really trying to help people get a better handle, get more confident, educated about these decisions.
Yeah.
That's really important.
Now, can you talk about some of the challenges that you've experienced as you've progressed throughout your career? And obviously now having your own brokerage, that's a very different, can of worms compared to working for somebody else. So how did you find that transition? Because it obviously comes with a lot more responsibility and, now taking care of your own team and things like that.
Well, the challenges over the time primarily were around learning how to delegate effectively, and growing the team, making sure I had the right people in the right seats.
Yeah.
I think the biggest challenge probably is that, like a lot of small business owners, I had a tendency to try to make it about me and like the Scott show. I call it the Scott show. You insert name,
Yeah.
but it's essentially I needed to be the one to save the day and do all the business development rather than help cultivate the team members and help them
Yeah.
grow. And over time, as I figured out how to be more of a mentor, be more of a teacher and a leader, the delegation got easier, the communication got more open. I was able to listen better and understand how to mentor, hold people accountable, have the harder conversations,
Yeah.
and grow the people on the team. Like the last 2 years, our team members have all had their best years. And then as we made the transition out of a big box brokerage to a boutique brokerage, the challenges are similar. I think there's challenges in terms of recruitment because you have to show people a little bit more. Okay, there's never been a more level playing field in real estate where somebody who has a lot of experience have sold for 22 years and sold a couple $1 billion worth of real estate, for me to be a competitor or to operate at the same level as a big shop. In fact, I think that we're more nimble. In some ways, I think we can do a better job of marketing property for people. My expertise came with me. I spoke to dozens and dozens of clients as I considered the move out of a larger company.
Yeah.
And so the challenges are in somewhat in recruitment. The challenges, I think, also we have a vendor partner behind the scenes to help us run some of the things that you would think would be hard, insurance and HR and some of the and payroll and things like that. That's actually not been the challenge as much as just making sure that we stay relevant. Little things like, do our emails bounce, from
Yeah.
marketing perspective, those kinds of things. But it's like any startup, there are always going to be challenges. And I think most of it, because I was running a team, they feel familiar.
Yeah.
They're echoes of the same challenges, and we just have to work our way through it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the main area to improve is just having the right systems and processes in place to guide your team, and then you're not necessarily micromanaging them in any way. Like they should have the fundamentals in terms of what they need to do, and it's just a matter of are they doing them?
That's right. Holding people accountable is really important. And I think also helping your team members create help them create a vision for what they want to do with their business,
Yeah.
and helping them on a weekly, quarterly, annual basis make sure that they're sticking to their own plan.
Yeah. Now, in terms of real estate investing, we talked about that in your bio. What I find really ironic is that a lot of realtors actually don't invest in real estate. I don't know why that is. But can you talk a little bit about your experience as a real estate investor on that side, what your portfolio looks like, and what your focus is?
What I would say, Serena, is that a lot of real estate agents and why they don't invest is because when people are buying their primary home, I think a lot of buyers focus too much on the investment side. This is the biggest investment of your whole life, so on and so forth, when really it's more about helping you move forward in your life, big picture.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, some agents are just not fluent in some of the nuts and bolts, the basics of real estate investing.
Yeah.
That is to say, real estate agents are not always the best investors.
Yeah.
But I think it's a huge mistake because we often do see deals before they
Opportunities.
come to market.
Yeah.
And the way I've structured it, my real estate investing has sort of grown alongside my business. Sometimes it was like the condo I bought. I started with the condo that I bought before I got engaged,
Yeah.
and I kept it for 20 years. And as a real estate, the thing that's so funny about being a real estate professional is you have all these extra tax breaks. You have all these ways of writing off your rental income against your ordinary income, your depreciation against your ordinary income. It's really tax efficient.
Yeah.
And so I ended up buying 3 condos in the same building that I had already owned something. And then over time, you become like an LP investor in clients and their funds that you're doing. And then ultimately, I grew up in New Orleans, like I said, so I bought some property with an old friend.
Yeah.
Who does manage properties in New Orleans. It gives me a great excuse to go visit family and look in on my folks, things like that.
Yeah.
And it's expanded over time.
Now, obviously, New York is one of the most expensive markets in the United States. What's New Orleans real estate market like in comparison?
Well, the challenge lately has been just like Florida, you have high costs of flood insurance.
Yeah.
And so that's been a real headwind. So the insurance piece has been a little bit scary, but that market has appreciated quite a bit in the last 10 years since I started looking at that market. And at the same time, the residential rents and even the commercial rents are not at the same level. But I would say, price wise for these types of properties, you can get into that market at $500,000, and the commercial development is much more accessible for people. I see deals where your returns ultimately, like we're invested in a hotel there, things like that. Certain items perform well, but they're all, it's all about the basics. What's the mortgage rate you're borrowing at? What's the, what's the upside for you? Can you do some value add there? And you, like everywhere else, if you make bad estimate, you sort of make assumptions that are wrong, you can get caught sideways.
Yeah, and not even just assumptions, just there's going to be things that are unexpected. Like during the pandemic, I don't know what it was like for you guys, but here, everything went crazy. It's like everyone all of a sudden wanted to move. Things went up 25-30% for a couple of years straight, and now they've dropped and they're stabilizing and stuff like that. But it's just a lot of people bought high, and now they're selling for, in some cases, like 200,000 to 300,000 below what they bought for just 3 years ago, right? So who could have ever expected that?
Yeah, you see that a lot in short-term rental markets.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's done very well, and he sent me recently a deck on, they're raising money to do a short-term rental fund, I think in Florida.
Yeah.
And I've personally, it's not my favorite asset class, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I've seen people get caught where they've done all the research they can do to see like, okay, what's it going to be?
Yeah.
What are the returns estimated? And still the costs, the expense side of the ledger really catches them by surprise, and they end up not making money. And then, like you said, they sell at a loss.
Yeah.
So I think it's for investors who are getting into this, it's very important to keep your variables as limited as possible so that you don't bite off more than you can chew.
Yeah, no, absolutely. On that note, we're just going to take a really brief break for a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Big ideas require big capital. And behind every empire you admire out there is someone who's mastered the art of raising it. Elon Musk, he's raised over $75 billion. Warren Buffett, He's built his empire by attracting capital from others. And every real estate tycoon you know of, their portfolio didn't grow from their savings. They scaled by raising capital. So if you're building something that matters, your ability to raise capital is not optional. It's literally the difference between slow growth and true scale. The challenge you're going to have, though, is you haven't built the systems, the story, or the structure that investors trust. Capital doesn't go to the person with the best idea. It goes to the person whose business is actually ready for it. So pick your stage, own it, build what your business needs at that stage to be able to attract the level of capital that you need where you're at today, not where you think you want to be tomorrow. If you do all of that, capital will follow. So the question is, what stage are you in, and what's the next thing that you need to do to grow your business?
Click the link below to schedule your capital raising session. We're going to go ahead and map out your custom blueprint and show you exactly how to implement this system in your business. Now remember, if you don't raise the capital, you don't pay. Click on the link below to schedule your strategy session now.
Thanks again for following along with this episode of Inspired to Invest. In addition to real estate, investing, and running my own brand experience agency for 18 years, I also published a book called The Accidental Entrepreneur in October of 2021. This is my story, and it chronicles how I turned tragedy into triumph to embrace my destiny in entrepreneurship. If you're interested in picking up a copy, you can find the link at serenahomesrealtor.com, and you can also find my link tree with all of the retailers in the details below. Thanks again for your support. Inspired to Invest is proudly sponsored by Share, a US-based platform designed to help Canadians and Americans invest in rental properties across the United States completely remotely. With Share, you don't have to deal with tenants, repairs, or trying to figure out unfamiliar markets on your own. They handle the entire process for you, from setting up your US entities to sourcing vetted rental properties in landlord-friendly states, to managing everything post-close with professional property management. It's a done-for-you turnkey solution designed to give you all the upside of real estate ownership without the typical landlord headaches. If you've been wanting to diversify into US real estate but didn't know where to start, Share could be just the partner you've been looking for. Hey everybody, welcome back to Inspired to Invest. I've got Scott Harris here with me from New York City today. He's the founder of Magnetic Real Estate, and we're talking about his experience not only as a licensed realtor and managing a team, but also as a real estate investor. Now, one thing I always like to ask people is what's the craziest thing that they've ever experienced, either in their career or as an investor?
Well, I sort of go, I mean, I think you mentioned I'm right. I have a book that's coming out in October, and I sort of took some creative license with your question. I would say it's more about miracles that I've seen where you all of a sudden I'm working with a client, and all of a sudden just the deal just pops out once we get really focused on what it is that they're looking for. Like it just happens. During COVID, we had a client who had already seen a property and wrote it off. It was too expensive. And all of a sudden it came in this market, the prices went down during COVID, which was different than every other market in the country.
Yeah.
And he was able to buy this property at like 15% below where it had been, which was already starting to fall.
Yeah.
They had lowered the price 10% and we bought it for 10% below that.
Yeah.
And so I think it's more miracles that we're seeing here where things go nuts, because we all in our market, we have unique things, something called a co-op, a cooperative apartment, where there's already these crazy dynamics putting together these deals. And I had a deal today just fall apart, $1.5 million deal, because the board decides they don't want people to live there part-time. They just decide this is somebody who's worth $20 million and they can buy anywhere and they love this apartment. And the board just said, we're not considering them. And the seller's pulling his hair out because of that. So I see too many crazy things all the time to
and
really
that's the thing. I think
one.
in any situation like that, you have to really understand the lay of the land when it comes to condo bylaws, or in this instance, like co-ops, right? Because sometimes they have been really unusual. I have a listing that has been on the market for a little while actually, but they have this tiny little box for like 8 lock boxes for 350 units. It's like, I was like, well, what if the seller couldn't be there? Like, there was just no other option to like let people in. I'm like, can I hang it on the fence? They're like, no, we'll cut it off. And I was like, this is absurd. Like, usually there's a big cage, there's not a limitation of like 0.002% of your units can have space in this tiny box, right? But apparently they're like, it's in the bylaws. This was voted. I'm like, who voted this? Like, it's crazy, right?
Right.
And I'm not super far away, but 20 minutes. So to go round trip, like anytime you have to let someone, it would be like a big headache. But sometimes there's just these like unusual little nuances, and you just want to know what you're what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of things like what you're most proud of, you did talk about things like miracles. So is there a particular success story that you'd want to highlight?
I would say, really the thing that I'm probably most proud of is during 2023 and 24, which were across America and including New York, really the most challenging markets I've ever seen in terms of low inventory, rising interest rates,
Yeah.
and just a business climate that was pretty challenging. Our team had their two best years, and it
Yeah.
was,
Wow.
so I was really, really proud of that, and to see everyone thrive, and to be able to show them, hey, what we're doing is different. We're
Yeah.
able to capture more market share and have some real high quality years during those times is really something I'm very proud of.
Now, what would you say is something that you or your team were doing different, maybe compared to other brokerages during that time frame that made you so successful?
Well, I think it has to do with the way we're encouraging, and what I write about in the book is what I call the magnetic method, which is a way of, it's like flipping the script, in investments. And I think the mistake that a lot of agents make is that they ask all the money questions first, and then they get into, the fun stuff. And what I suggest is that people are stressed, like we said, and if you help create the inspiration why they're doing this and get to
Yeah.
know them, they can relax, and then they don't, because they can get very defensive when it's what's your budget and all the details, I call them nuts and bolts, that people think should come first.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of real estate agents ignore the people aspect of this. We put the
Yeah.
people first, and ultimately are encouraging, and it's very much real estate therapy,
Yeah.
but with these gentle nudges to keep people moving forward. And
Yeah.
whether they're selling or buying, that ultimately helps people get to the end finish line in one piece.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times these markets, if people are like, oh, there's no inventory, and they focus on that, then they won't see anything. But if you
Yeah.
focus on what are we trying to do for you, the properties find their way into our awareness, and then we
Yeah.
can make it happen for them. And I think that's really the biggest difference. The differentiator is believing that this is going to happen, kind of being the captain of the ship in the storm, and then just keep on going. What's the next thing we can do, and the next thing we can do
Yeah.
that ultimately gets us where we want to go.
Well, I mean, I think at the end of the day, this is such a personal situation for people when they are buying a new home. So I think building that rapport first and building that trust, I think that makes perfect sense in terms of what you're saying, instead of just diving right into all the nitty-gritty questions and stuff like that. I think one of the challenges that we've seen, because again, we did have that escalation during the pandemic, a lot of people are like, well, I could have sold this for this price last year or the year before. And a lot of
Right.
times it's hard just to shift their mindset. Well, we're not there. But ideally, as long as you're buying and selling in the same market, then that's kind of irrelevant, right? Because you're going to also be buying low if you're potentially selling a little bit lower. So just trying to manage their expectations when it comes to things like that, because, it's just been a shifting reality that everything was so hot for so long. And then they're like, ah, what
It
could
can be a real
have.
disappointment. It can be a disappointment. We
Yeah.
had to tell a client recently, and we didn't sell it to them in 2006, but the property they bought in 2006 for 2.4 is worth 2.2 today, almost 20 years later. They
Wow.
didn't like that. They didn't like to hear that from us, but we did it. We said it and did it in the nicest way we possibly could do.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, we thought it was worth $3 million. You're like, well, it's really not. And here's the data. And, we're happy to look at your data and compare,
Yeah.
and of course they couldn't show us anything. It was just what they hoped and felt. And,
Yeah.
and there's certain moments when you have to just have the heart to heart, have the hard conversation, and
Yeah.
set the foundation for a successful outcome.
Yeah.
And we've gotten plenty of calls 6 months later that say, hey, you were right, and we feel really badly that we dismissed you, and can you please work with us and help us get this done?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. I think there are obviously some agents that would go in and, price it at whatever somebody wants, and they're trying to just get the listing, and then, you're faced with dropping the price or improving the price. Now, in terms of how real estate has changed your life, can you talk a little bit about financial freedom and where you're at on that journey, whether it's in terms of cash flow, number of doors, like, where do you kind of see yourself on that timeline?
Well, 2008, I've been here, Serena, through some different market cycles. And in 2008 and 2009, we hit the challenges. And that was when I sort of got turned on to Tony Robbins and really starting to look and build goals and start to think about financial freedom in a different way. I mean, I'd already gotten married and had one child and had already bought an investment property, but was like not thinking about it as deeply.
Yeah.
And it took years and years of building the right team and losing this and a lot of ups and downs and setbacks. But where I stand now is that I feel really, really grateful. I've got a family that I love, and we've got a home that fits everyone, and we've got a portfolio of real estate that doesn't replace my income yet, but it certainly does great. And we've got a house at the beach that we that almost pays for itself. And so, we're on the way to do some in terms of investment. But the nice thing is that there's like a path towards that we can see. Yeah. And it just you have to be really patient finding the right opportunities. And what I found often is that, since we started buying real estate, we're at low interest rates, that one starts to help the other. And you don't have to make a lot of really good decisions. You just have to make a few. Yeah. And that really starts the ball rolling downhill.
Yeah. I mentor of mine once said, if you don't know where you're going, you could end up someplace else. So I think it is really important to be clear on where you want to go and why. Now, in terms of things like lessons for somebody that's starting out, are there any pearls of wisdom that you would want to leave for anyone that's listening or watching right now?
What I tell people a lot who are early in their career is that they need to make, as hard as it is and as much as they, hey, I need to put food on the table and everything else. If you can really find it in your heart to make this about the other person, make this about being of service to your client, you are going to accelerate your earning capacity because you're going to be listening with a different set of ears, and you're going to find more ways to help people that go well beyond real estate.
Yeah.
And so if you do it that way, you become the resource, that the value you add is you as a whole person. Yeah. It's not just you as a real estate agent. Don't think of yourself as a cardboard cutout or an advertisement on a park bench, on a bus stop. Think of yourself as this person that brings all this talent and all these unique skills to the table. And then listen, be curious, and you're going to find ways to help people. That's going to accelerate your growth more than anything else. And if you turn it into being about survival and I've got to scrap this out and hustle, and that there's value in working hard, but the more you can make it about the other person, you're going to really shrink the time between starting out and starting to really see some results.
Yeah, no, I love that. Now, the name of this podcast is Inspired to Invest. So I always like to ask if you have a particular quote that motivates or inspires you.
I thought about this a little bit. I saw this question before, and I'm a big believer in pulling from lots of different places. I couldn't quote the entire Marianne Williamson quote about that, people are really afraid of shining their own light. People can look that up. But I came across a wonderful book called A Course in Miracles, which Marianne Williamson actually talks about. And this is the one, as things go, when I have challenges, I always say that God is the strength in which I can trust. And I love that, because then it's not about you doing this all on your own. You'll find that you've got all the resources you need. You have to ask for help, and you get it from your friends, from your mentors, and whatever your faith is. It's really important to just be grateful for all that you have, and suddenly, like, miracles really do happen. It's kind of amazing.
So I love that. Now, for anyone that wants to get in touch to learn more about you, your book, or if they want to buy or sell a home, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Well, if they go on LinkedIn and look up Scott Harris and Magnetic, they'll find me there. They can find me on Instagram, which is Scotty Harris, SCOTTIE Harris. And if they want to buy the book or learn more about the book, they can go to pursueyourhome.com, and they can learn how to pre-order it. They can reach out for questions, And as we get closer to the book release, which is coming sooner than I can't even believe, in October, that they all of a sudden will be able to see the resources that are going to be offered in the book. We're going to have all sorts of resources for readers online so that they can take some of the same assessments and get a sense of their balance sheet and all these other exciting ways to move forward with confidence.
Awesome. I love that. So we'll make sure that we include all of that in the show notes below. Of course, thank you for your time out of your busy day to be with us today. And for anyone that's watching or listening, if you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And you followed along on social at Inspired to Invest Podcast. And remember, when you invest in yourself, the sky's the limit. Thanks again. Thank you to M1 Capital Connectors for bringing you this episode of Inspired to Invest. The views represented on this podcast are for general information only and does not constitute investment or other professional advice or an offering of securities. The host and guests featured on Inspired to Invest make no representations as to the performance of any particular investment. Should you decide to make an investment, you are responsible for conducting your own review and analysis. It is recommended that you obtain independent legal, accounting, and tax advice from licensed professionals.